it's 9:03, so I think it's enough time for all the people who are going to connect. So welcome everybody and greetings from San Jose, Costa Rica. I'm Kifah Sasa. I'm Program Officer responsible for the Nature, Climate and Energy portfolio in this country office. I'd like to start thanking Lies Ferrucchi, Regional Team Leader for this portfolio, and Claudia Ortiz, RTA for Adaptation, for approaching us and helping us organize this webinar, which is about how does the UNDP Nature, Climate and Energy portfolio in Costa Rica help the country's response to and recovery from the COVID-19 crisis. So I'd like to start by saying just two main statements of what we want to transmit with this presentation. First, we want to explain that we can have an impact to the COVID response and recovery without repurposing. So all the presentations that you're about to see have been done without repurposing. We're just taking advantage of the existing resources, networks, teams, projects that we have in place without moving away from the expected results, but just with slight modifications, and this is what we want to present to you. The second statement that we have is that the Nature, Climate and Energy portfolio has the potential to be at the core of national recovery responses. You will learn from today's presentations how, for example, the overdependence of government income to carbon consumption can have an implications for recovery, and what Nature, Climate and Energy teams can do for those reversals. We will learn about the importance of water provision and what these teams can do to provide water provision and support secure water provision in rural settings, as also the links between mental health and keeping reforestation within social bubbles or family units, and also the role that we can play for the economic recovery of countries. So today's presentations will be on those lines. The first one's going to be by our resident representative, Jose Vicente Troya, who's going to talk about mainstreaming decarbonization and transitioning to a green economy in national recovery strategies. Then we're going to have Natalia Mesa Ramirez, biobusiness specialist, who's going to talk about strengthening resilience to COVID through the development of alternative testing methods. Gerardo Quiroz Cuadra, project manager of an SCCF project in Costa Rica for climate change adaptation of rural aqueducts, is going to talk about supporting the provision and access to clean water in rural areas in times of COVID. Miriam Miranda, project coordinator of the Production Landscapes Project of the GEF with UNDP, is going to talk about reforestation during pandemic times. And finally, Ana Lucia Orozco is going to talk about, project manager from Biofin, is going to talk about the financial solutions for the COVID-19 recovery in Costa Rica. Then we're going to have all those 5 presentations in one block, each one hopefully lasting only 10 minutes, dear presenters. We're not going to open for any questions and answers until the end of the 5 presentations of 10 minutes for Q&A, which is going to be managed and facilitated by our RTA in Adaptation, Claudia Ortiz. So I'll let our first, we'll go to the first presentation with Mr. Jose Vicente.
Good morning, everyone. So happy to reconnect with the vibrant nature, climate, and energy community working in the Latin American country offices and the regional hub in Panama. A big hug from Costa Rica to all of you. Let me start with, please, the first slide. Thank you, Kifah. First, I would like to thank Jose, Lies, and Claudia and those involved in organizing this workshop to showcase the response of the Costa Rica country office to the COVID-19 crisis and the role Nature, Climate, and Energy portfolio has played in this regard. Let me re-emphasize this first message. It is a country office response, an informed one, and in many ways led by the inputs from the Nature, Climate, and Energy teams. This is what is needed in this crisis. This means involving not only the regional advisors, program officers, and project teams, but particularly the senior management, and in the responses offered by Nature, Climate, Energy portfolio. Therefore, in my capacity as resident representative, I'm the one making the first of these presentations. From a programmatic point of view, mainstreaming decarbonization and transition into a green economy, into national recovery strategies is what UNDP needs to be doing in all its work related to the COVID-19 response, including recovery in a framework where the pursuit of gender equality and effective women's empowerment critically helps this transition. Today, I want to share 4 actions we have taken in this regard. Next slide, please. Program strategy adjustment. The nature, climate, and energy portfolio in Costa Rica has historically represented between the 80 and 90% of the annual country office delivery. Most of it comes from vertical funds, and as you have heard often, do not allow for repurposing. This means most of our money may not be simply redirected to the response needed on request by our counterpart. Obviously, this runs the risks that some counterparts may look as having huge amount of resources that are unrelated to a national response. As a result, we may be considered as less relevant. With this context in mind, we reframe our entire country office program strategy for the next 3-year period to emphasize as an internal programmatic logic that all actions were in some way contributing to a response without repurposing. The next presentations are each an example of the modified country office program strategy, which now is as follows: to position UNDP as a lead partner to facilitate multi-stakeholder collaborative action to support the design and implementation of public policies based on knowledge instruments, digital transformation, and development finance that accelerates recovery from the impacts of COVID-19 in transition to an inclusive green and blue economy with a gender perspective and intersectional analysis, which helps building more resilient and inclusive societies and ecosystems. Again, this does not mean modifying the committed resources that we have to a new objective. Instead, it means reflecting on the financial, project, and human resources that we have to respond better. In Costa Rica, like in all country offices, we have an interdisciplinary team of people willing to support the recovery and agree on the programmatic aim that this entails in terms of transitioning to a green and decarbonized economy. A change in the country office strategy only means a change in mindsets, a psychological permission for all our teams to go the extra mile to make our work useful for the national response requiring these times. The NCE team has helped frame and help lead the entire program strategy modification to reflect the aim of mainstreaming decarbonization and transitioning to a green economy into national recovery strategies. Next slide, please. The second thing we did for this mainstreaming was to take advantage of the opportunity the COVID-19 crisis brings for UNDP to raise awareness about the implications of government income reliance on fossil fuel consumption and prices. As all you know, UNDP leads the United Nations country socio-economic impact assessment and response. Each country office has been offered by our bureau to develop a quick economic impact assessment of COVID-19 and policy recommendations. Instead of hiring a team of external experts to develop such paper, in Costa Rica, we produce it in-house. We did hire consultants, but the narrative of the initial economic impact assessment of COVID-19 was developed with the strong involvement of the senior management and program officers in our country office. as well as with very useful feedback from the Office of the UNDP's Chief Economist in Latin America. This allows for the NCE to position better strategic messages like the need for decarbonization and transition to green economic models. The COVID economic impact assessment in Costa Rica has one finding that I'm sure is shared by many of the countries in this call. Currently, 21% of government income depends on fossil fuel consumption and prices. The oil market exchange reached negative numbers, as you know, and this translates into a huge blow to the government's capacity to respond to COVID-19. And this adds to the fiscal vulnerability the country has to future shocks. This reality in Costa Rica and elsewhere is an opportunity for UNDP to help governments transition from carbon-based economy and oil-dependent government revenues to a more resilient and inclusive low-carbon development route. So, included as part of the recommendation of such a study was that for countries to recover better, they must stop reliance on fossil fuels. Next slide, please. The third thing we're doing is to involve the nature, climate, and energy teams in the national macroeconomic policy and national planning discussions for recovery. In Costa Rica, we have a long-standing involvement of the NCE portfolio in these types of discussions. First, through the Biofin project that has identified special financial gaps to implement national biodiversity strategies, which we will hear about in a minute. Currently, we are finalizing the design of our largest GF project ever, which is called Transitioning to an Urban Green Economy and Delivering Global Environmental Benefits. You can tell by the name that this is our most ambitious project so far. We want to incorporate polluter pay principle in legislation and fiscal policy, and this is the way to substitute fiscal revenue dependent on carbon consumption. The CO is taking advantage of the networks the NCE team has and the fora the NCE project provides to mature ideas and reach the agreements needed for this transition to a green economy. Some examples include modifying water fees to include the cost of nature-based adaptation solutions to build resilience to climate change scenarios, leading to less water availability. Second, modifying the way cars are taxed so there's an incentive to shift to greener alternatives. Third, creating a law taxing plastic to generate a green fund for transformation of the domestic plastic industry into a circular logic and fund for community-based coastal and river cleaning campaigns. And finally, eliminating tax exemptions to agrochemicals to increase funds for government and helping shift towards sustainable food production. In times of the COVID-19 response, the fact that is in 6 months' time, we will provide government with resources to fund economic modeling of new draft policies and to communicate strategically their need so as to get these approved and become legislations, mean that we are more relevant than ever for macroeconomic policy and development planning reform. Next slide, please. Finally, I would like to briefly speak the case for decarbonizations. We do need to keep raising the concern of the perils of carbon-based fiscal policies for development, and we must mainstream decarbonization and transitioning to a green economy into national recovery strategies, and try to avoid falling into the trap posed by development routes only based on commodity-rich settings, which in several cases lead to the paradox of plenty or the natural resource curse, where dependence on a single commodity has negative impacts on other economic activities. As indicated by a 2017 IMF paper, after testing 68 commodity-rich developing countries, there is strong evidence on the financial vulnerability of these countries to the commodity price shocks. In other words, high carbon routes and or single commodity routes for development usually do not only devastate natural capital, but are also particularly vulnerable to other shocks, such as steep price declining as it is happening in these days. Our country office is accompanying Costa Rica efforts to a green economy with the broad lens of the SDGs, meaning we not only emphasize economic and environmental advantages of decarbonization, but also the social implications and benefits. For example, and again, taking advantage of the team of gender specialists, the nature, climate, and energy portfolio provides to this country office, we have made very important contributions to gender equality in the workforce by advancing on gender equality certification program for companies. We have also developed internal gender policies with the National Water Authority and Ministries of Environment and of Agriculture. This gives us legitimacy and gravitas within macroeconomic policy and development planning discussions to remind decision makers that decarbonization must be done leaving no one behind, especially women. Thank you so much for this opportunity to continue sharing our advocacy for a greener and more inclusive and resilient economy as the basis for recovering better after the pandemics. Let me finish saying, these are the times when we need to bounce back better, building more resilient and inclusive societies, stronger and much more diverse economies, and thus enabling a greater resilience and diversity in our natural ecosystem. This is not a repurposing business, since bouncing back better is within the DNA of our nature, climate, and energy portfolio. And I dare to say, within our own DNA. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Jose Vicente. It was very good. And I'll let Natalia Mesa please come to the virtual floor.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. I'm going to explain you what are we doing in UNDP Costa Rica to strengthen resilience to COVID-19 through development of alternative testing methods, which is part of the country investment facility. My name is Natalia Mesa Ramirez, and I am biobusiness specialist. Before starting, I would like to give you a little bit of background, anecdotic of this history. This project, in fact, was born to tackle coronavirus crisis that you already know is a challenging, completely new context. But we are using existing collaboration network and framework to do this job. And an important thing here is also that we are using our team skills to do that. A couple months ago, we were in a meeting, a virtual meeting, first of the many virtual meetings. We started to figure out with partners, what else could we do with this crisis? And yet, we use that specific space or that specific framework to create this proposal, or this project. And an important thing also here is that everyone has a pass. And what I mean with that is that we're using team skills. In my specific case, I've been working with Biofilm project for almost 2 months, but I started working with UNDP almost 4 years ago with a project related to climate change and drinking water system for rural communities. And before that, in fact, I had experience in private sector working with applied biotechnology. And we use that kind of basic knowledge to create this proposal. And the key point here is UNDP already has a global amazing network with top talented people. And in crisis times, we must to take advantage of that, being innovative, being creative, and think outside the box. Next slide, please. I'm going to explain you exactly about this project. Let's talk about COVID-19 detection. First of all, we have to understand what are we doing in Costa Rica, what is the current approach. Well, here we are applying testing just for people that already has highly suspicious symptoms or an epidemiology link, which means someone that already was in contact with a positive confirmed case for coronavirus. Why are we doing that? Well, first of all, the most important thing is that tests are a limited resource. And that is important because the entire world needs to test people. And that also means that availability and price of commercial tests that we are using could change in the next few months. Well, I'm going to explain you the main concept of this technology using a fun example about food. And food, I mean soup. Please, next, yeah. The main concept is here. Current diagnosis depends on commercial kits, and that is relying on instant soup for having your dinner. Yeah, it could be a fast and easy way to prepare your meal, but what happens if suddenly we need millions of servings of this soup? You already have heard the answer, because what we need to do is try a recipe from scratch, and I mean that is the alternative protocol. A recipe where we can put together all the ingredients and cook our own soup. And that reduces dependence on commercial kits, and also gonna be a cheaper way to do or to have the same result. Important things here, it doesn't mean that we are not going to produce or fabric our commercial kits, neither that we are going to produce the ingredients. Instead of that, we are creating a free access recipe. And that gives us more options in the global market in times of high demand for ready-made kits. And that is resilience. Next slide, please. Well, but exactly how it works. Here we have 4 main steps that apply both for commercial kits or for the alternative protocol that are, first of all, first step, we have to take a sample, then we have to extract RNA material, which is genetic material, convert that genetic material into DNA and amplify specific pieces of DNA using a reaction named real-time PCR, which allows us to have a kind of fingerprint made of genetic material. And the result is we can know if we're talking about coronavirus or not. Okay, that is like the normal protocol for molecular biology analysis. Do you remember that I used the example for the instant soup? Well, in fact, when we're talking about commercial kits, each step here that we are talking about uses specific solutions that are, in the case of commercial kits, top secret, copyright protected solutions. And for example, the step 2, wanna use solution A, solution B, and solution C, and go on for the extraction step. Our alternative protocol gives us the option, the alternative recipe to create or to cook this or prepare these solutions from scratch. And that is full of advantages. First of all, it's gonna be a free access recipe. Anyone could try it if you have the correct equipment. It's gonna be cheaper also, and also reduces dependence on commercial kits that, in fact, in the case of Costa Rica, we are buying from Germany, United States, and South Korea. It also applies for new diseases, I hope no, but step 2 and 3 with the alternative protocol also applies for the next pandemic. Important point here, or key point, we are using UNDP Science Connection plus our biobusiness platform, which is part of the Biofilm project. And that made us relevant. And yeah, this was a big deal. In fact, the president announced this on national TV during daily COVID report and thanked UNDP for our support on this innovation. This is another example of UNDP Nature, Climate, Energy team lifting our relevance for the response to COVID-19. Yeah, next slide, please. I know it's a lot of information for a 10-minute talk. And trust me, I already tried to explain this with a lot of people inside and outside UNDP. And here I prepared some frequently asked questions, because I already said that's gonna be cheaper, but how much? We are expecting to drop that cost from $100 each test to $30 or $40 each one. Technology transfer, yeah, any country can do it if you have the basic equipment. Remember that I used the example for the soup? Well, for cooking, you need the kitchen. Validation trial, yes, we are trying to do that that also with the Costa Rican health system. Approval, yep, each country must validate it, but an important thing here is where we are using the most reliable and specific test that is real-time PCR, and it's the same, exactly the same test that is already made or done for commercial kits. So we already have a lot of way to do, but the approval is gonna be a little bit easier. Okay, where are we? Do you remember that I explained you that we have 4 steps for this protocol in molecular biology lab? Well, we already have results for the extraction step, that is the step 2. And we are going to have more information in next few weeks. This is a 3 months project and we are in our week 4. And next slide, please. And thanks a lot. That is the information about this project. My name is Natalia Mesa Ramirez, and I am bioenterprises specialist for the Bioenterprises Funding Platform, which is part of the Biodiversity Finance Initiative. Here are my contact information if you need more detail about this project or about the protocol. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Natalia, and we love your metaphor. Very good. In like having some soup now. So please, Mr. Gerardo Quiroz, to the virtual floor.
Good morning. Such a pleasure to share with you people, friends from UNDP in the region. In Costa Rica, we have about 1,400 rural aqueducts, which are administrated by local organizations. These rural aqueducts provides water for 29% of the national demand, and this means around 1,300,000 persons in the country. Our project works with this Rural Aqueducts Association in water-stressed regions. We promote basically climate resilient measures based on ecosystem, infrastructure, and disaster risk management with gender inclusive perspective and a big participation of the community and small agricultural producers. Next, please. Even before that the restrictions started, we understood that we need to find a way to continue our operations. So we did a rapid search of communication technology alternative, but the real challenge was to encourage, convince, train, and help partners to use the platforms, our partners, but not only the rural partners, but also many old-fashioned urban public officers that normally have some resistance to apply or to utilize new ways of technology. So very early, we started having these meetings, coordination workshops, using remote communication. By the way, the Teams platform that UNDP already used, for us, has been the most useful of the tools. Next. As you know, hygienic measures and water availability are critical elements in the fight against the virus. And obviously rural aqueducts have a crucial role to ensure the permanent provision of clean water to community. So we are fully supporting their operation continuity and also the emergency response activities. The aqueducts has reorganized their plumbing crews, and they have reorganized the office operation in order to continue bringing the services in spite of the restrictions established by the health authorities. They are also providing instruction to end users on efficient use of water and hygienic measures for disease prevention and water safety, especially because in confinement, the use of water increases many people is in the house, they remain longer periods in house, so we are using more water. And we were at that moment in the peak of the dry season with a significant reduction of flow rates. Next. The aqueducts did many things to react to this the crisis. For example, the installation of water sinks and items for personal hygiene in places with potential public crowding, such as bus stops or markets, and the installing of temporary water points in communities without aqueduct system or communities with drought situation. This has been additional services provided by the aqueducts organization to the population. Next. Our main counterpart, which is the Costa Rican Institute of Aqueducts, has requested the project to advance our hydric protection communication campaign, which was projected for later on this year. They requested us to advance this campaign because they recognize having difficulties to transmit adequate and convincing messages to the population in the current context. So basically, we are going to remaster their entire line of communications with a new range of approaches to reach larger audiences through more efficient channels and with more diverse messages, including instruction and recommendation related to pandemic, drought, shortage, and water resources protection. Next. In order to support the stay-at-home messages and to provide children with useful entertainment options and to promote environmental awareness and commitment, we are organizing with a bunch of partners the 2020 Nature Gardens Challenge for kids from 4 to 12 years old who staying at home will participate on challenges such as drawing, writing stories related to environment, recycling, composting, home gardening, or saving water, everything doing in the house. Next. This is briefly what we can share on this pandemic context. Basically, we have not repurposed any activity or budget, but we have applied a business continuity strategy based on the current project programming. In terms of lesson learned, I would like to mention that all precedent efforts done by the project to support rural aqueducts to ensure water resources has been really useful to back up their creative and efficient response in this critical emergency. I would like also to mention that Rural Aqueducts Association have not stopped on their duty of bringing water to their communities, even in restrictive conditions. Rather, they are providing additional services for the welfare and the common good. And finally, there is a need to promote, to train and improve access to communication technologies to be used as a daily work tool that also will help to reduce long distances displacements. This is basically our share, but I don't want to finish my intervention without mentioning that yesterday our National Congress has approved the access to water, to potable water, as a human right protected by national constitution. So this is a very good, important, and crucial new for Costa Rican society. Thank you.
Thank you, Gerardo. And it's critical work what you guys are doing. Without water, we cannot really wash our hands. The next, please, Miriam Miranda to the virtual floor. Miriam?
By the end. Oh.
Miriam, we can just barely hear you now. Please start again.
Okay, you just hear me?
We can hear you fine. Please go ahead.
Okay. Started. My name is Miriam Miranda. I am the project manager of the project called Conserving Biodiversity Through Sustainable Management in Production Landscape in Costa Rica. It is a multiple stakeholders DIM project working with public agencies, local government, and communities. The project started by the end of 2018. It is an organized planification process and an interdisciplinary technical unit. COVID-19 forced the project to use adaptive management measures to mitigate its impact on project implementation. We did many things to adapt to the sanitary protocol, but at the same time, we keep our investment of $2 million. One example of these things are the family brigade for the reforestation in the city. Why? Why family brigade for landscape reforestation in the city? We established them to give economic recognition to families who have lost or decreased their income due to COVID-19. Additionally, to provide project stakeholders with an opportunity to have contact with green spaces and nature for their mental health during, that is very, very important at this time during the social distancing. The project work in the Maria Aguilar Interurban Biological Corridor, in short, CBIMA, located in the middle of the great metropolitan area of Costa Rica. This corridor is severely polluted, the forest cover is fragmented, and the ecosystem services are deteriorated. Parks and public green spaces for urban recreation are limited. The corridor is mostly an urban landscape. 76% of the territory has an urban use. Here live about 10 people by square meters. Only 14% correspond to green infrastructure, between them park, wooded sidewalk, and gardens. Okay, next slide, please. How we organize to do this project. Okay, we organize in 4 steps. First is a family selection. Second, online training. Third, in the field, planting trees and honey plants, and monitoring and maintenance. Then I am going to share with you, to explain to you very briefly one of each step. First, remember that we have to have a very clear planification process. Then, selection of family brigade for reforestation in the city to improve connectivity. 50 families from the social bubble that were financially affected by COVID-19 were selected from CBIMA in coordination with community-based organizations. The first requirement to be selected is to live near the reforestation site in order to avoid public transportation. Only if it is absolutely necessary, private local transport will be used. The second is to be trained on sanitary protocol for COVID-19 and then all the reforestation process. It's important to mention that a cooperation agreement with local NGO was established for the administrative work. Okay, the second step, virtual training in social bubbles. The course was developed and implemented by UNDP technical team. The course runs in 2 weeks, twice a week for 90 minutes. Training concentrates on trees are essential to improve connectivity and environmental services. Planting trees is an easy process and requires basic tools. A protocol to plant trees and honey plant is available. And then the very, very important part of this course is implementation of that sanitary protocol. The third step is planting trees and honey plant in the city. For the planting process, each planting site will have a technical coordinator. We work in 5 municipalities. That means that we have 5, 1 per each municipality. Among its responsibilities have to coordinate with UNDP teams and families, to guide the planting process inside, georeferencing trees and plants, and write a report. Once on the field, a forestry technician receives each family to secure first sanitary protocols and then to guide the activity. The sites were selected and mapped by the UNDP and local government technical teams. Each planting spot was previously marked by the technician team. The projects provide all required supplies: planting site map, trees and plants, organic fertilizer, hydrogel, and COVID-19 protection equipment. Okay, the last step is correspond to monitoring and maintenance. It's very important that maintenance, because normally people plant trees and they forget it about. But maintenance is important to reach the goals. Municipalities and UNDP team will be in charge of stream maintenance, watering, weed removing, fertilization, and other activities. And then UNDP will map the trees in the monitoring system for urban land use. This system is being constructed. And then what we learn about this family brigade for reforestation in the city. We group in four groups. First, that adaptive management is possible, but you have to have a planning, a very organized planning to adapt to any situation like COVID-19. Then that always you can work with in social partnership, that you can improve social partnership, because we are working with multiple stakeholders here. And then very important that our main goal is to improve connectivity in the city. And then with family brigades, because last year we planted 60 hectares in the city, and this year we have to do it. We have to do at least 60 hectares in the city. Remember that it's a very urban city. And then we have a very, not much space to plan, but that reason, because it has to be very organized, planning have to be very, very deep. And then in this way, we can continue improving connectivity. That is one of the most important things to people, because people who is in contact with green space, they are healthy people. Then we help. In these four groups, we have many lessons learned. We adapt several federal activities. And then finally, we have available a video from all this process that is in YouTube. You will have the link to watch. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Miriam. That was lovely. And we will be sharing these slides and links to the videos mentioned by Miriam. And I'll allow Ana Lucia Orozco to have the virtual floor.
Thank you, and greetings to everyone. I'll present the financial solutions that are related to the recovery in Costa Rica regarding the COVID-19. Next slide, please. Next. The BioFin initiative in Costa Rica addresses a biodiversity finance gap estimated in 0.07% of the GDP. Our strategy to address this gap is reflected on 6 priority financial solutions, as you can see reflected on our icons below. Next slide, please. Nevertheless, COVID-19 has had its effect on public finance for nature due to the contraction of economic activities, the decrease of public income and expenditure, and increase of the fiscal debt. Preliminary, we are estimating an increase of $25 million US, summing up to the 200 million annual gap mentioned earlier. Thus, our 6 financial solutions have been touched by COVID effects. Through the reduction of fuel tax collection, which is not only the 3rd most important source of public income, but also the main source of funding for the Payment of Ecosystem Services program managed by FONAFIFO. It's around 93%. As we all know, tourism has dropped substantially, and considering that this activity represents direct and indirect 8% of GDP for Costa Rica, this is a critical and deep wound to our economy. Protected area revenues are affected by this. They have been decreased both from public expenditure and entrance fees. The latter represents almost 30% of the National Conservation Area System budget. Even though we have all been moved with the images of wildlife activity evidencing how urban landscapes are actual biological corridors, economic constraints are threatening livelihoods and in some areas are already exhibiting potential threats to ecosystems. For example, last week, we heard that in Corcovado National Park, there have been an increase in presence of hunters, drug traffickers, and gold diggers. Inequalities are also exacerbated for women in rural areas who have less access to incentives, credits, even though they are critical for nature conservation and restoration, as we have heard from previous presentations. These effects are also opportunities. Natalia has shown how biobusinesses are also strategic for COVID-19 response, but she is also in charge of consolidating our biobusiness financial platform, which is critical for the country's greener and bluer reactivation strategy. Next slide, please. Now let me show you 3 more examples of how we are adapting our 6 financial solutions to this new context. First, the green bond for protected areas. We have had to adapt the original analysis for the securitization of future flows, which means bringing future revenues to the present when they are most required through a special purpose vehicle. Can we please tap? I think we have 2 animations. Thank you. We're evaluating and enhancing the current methodology and legal decree for entrance fees, addressing options for the modernization of systems to ease payments, promote internal tourism, while considering health requirements to control visitor capacity. We're also addressing coherence of the different legal instruments dispersed in forest, biodiversity, and wildlife legal frameworks, which are critical for this securitization of future flows. Tap, please. Can we tap? Thank you. No, before, sorry. Let's leave it there. We have also had to update the repayment goals to include, first, a financial resilience for SINAC during lockdown and reactivation of tourism, which has just started in this 16th of May in some protected areas. Second, the capacity to invest in infrastructure for protected areas to dynamize potential concessions and improve tourist services. And third, which was our original purpose, potentially have a surplus that would allow for the repayment of expropriated lands in protected areas. Next slide, please. Our second example is the payment for ecosystem services, what we call the PES 2.0. The purpose of this financial solution is to address the financial risk mentioned earlier regarding the fuel tax reduction and to extend the program to other ecosystem services that are not currently incentivized. Our initial scenario was that this fuel tax would be reduced 10 years from now due to a successful decarbonization of the economy. Nevertheless, today we know that this reduction of an economic constraint is threatening almost the PES contracts that are currently contracted. A third objective is to have instruments for gender equality linked with nature. In this context, BioFin UNDP has co-developed with the Ministry of Environment a national program called More Women, More Nature. One of its objectives is to mobilize funding for women economic empowerment. Please tap. Tomorrow on International Biodiversity Day, we will be launching the program through a press conference release, which will be transmitted live from the Presidency of Costa Rica, and where the financial instruments denominated Women and Nature Credit, developed by Funde Cooperación para el Desarrollo Sostenible and the Mixed Institute of Social Aid, will be presented, as well as FONAFIFO by your side, which includes gender mainstreaming within the PES program and credits within the fund. Please, you're most welcome to join the live transmission through our social networks of the Presidency of Costa Rica and UNDP Costa Rica. Next slide, please. The third example is our Bonded for Nature program, which is an umbrella scheme for private and public alliances for nature finance. We have developed a scheme that allows specific campaigns that contribute to underfinanced topics, such as wildlife management, exotic species. But currently, we are reorientating these campaigns with the National Tourism Institute and mechanisms to address and contribute to economic reactivation strategy, including promotion of sustainable and aware local tourism, for example, through the images that you see to your right. With this last image and logo, return or reconnect to the essential, I would like to add that all of these efforts are only possible because our nature, climate, and energy cluster acts as an extended family with common goals, and that we also rely on intercluster cooperation and strategic alliances and partnerships with government, civil society, and private sector to build back better. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ana Lucia. And I'll leave the floor to Claudia for Q&A.
Thank you, everybody. Okay, I hope everybody can see me and hear me. Well, I want to, first of all, thank everybody who presented. I am mindful of the time, but we did say that this webinar was going to be up until 11:20 Panama time. So we have about at least 20 minutes for discussion. I just wanted to, before I ask the people for their questions, I have about 95 of you connected. So you should have an option to raise your hand. So please just click on that so I can see your hand raised, and then I can call on you to make your question, and perhaps I'll call in a few questions and then get back to the presenters for a response, and that way we have more of an interactive discussion. I wanted to just mention really quickly that this is, I think, the first webinar of its kind. We've all been sort of engaged, involved, or hosting several webinars that have been organized by mainly in headquarters or maybe even the regional hubs. But in this case, we wanted to give the floor to actually people who are practitioners in the front lines, the project managers that are working with this day to day in the field, to be able to really share their lessons and their experiences in two main dimensions. So on the one hand is, how do we ensure continuity of our business and continuity of the activities and outcomes of our project in spite of, restricted mobility, etc. And so on the one hand, we have different communications tools, but on the other hand, we have adaptive management, such as the one presented by Miriam, the family brigades, which I think is a fabulous example of how to quickly take the opportunities that this crisis brings up and still continue to not only complete your goal or your target in reforestation, but also give an added incentive to the families that are already suffering from this crisis. And then the second dimension is to ensure that climate and low carbon energy, low carbon initiatives and biodiversity initiatives are still at the front and center of our government's recovery response. So those are the two dimensions. And I wanted to just rescue one of the phrases that comes out of Gerardo's presentation on the adaptation project, which is, if you have been able to, for example, provide a human right such as potable drinking water to communities during normal time, and this is already climate informed, etc., it's going to be easier to have this critical resource in a times of crisis. So here, you know, we do need to think about the fact that prevention, the cost of prevention is always going to be less than the cost that we're now seeing of coping with crises such as, you know, not only COVID, but biodiversity crisis and the climate crisis. So this is something we have to keep in mind. And it's very much in line with the UNDP integrated strategy on COVID-19 response, but also on the different offers that are being put together and rolled out by the NCE team. So just to keep that in mind. And I will now go to you to give you the floor for any questions, comments, follow-up ideas on this. So please raise your hand. Okay, I see Rose. I'm sorry?
No, I was just saying Rosemary has her hand raised.
Yeah, Rosemary, please go ahead.
Hi, good morning, colleagues in Costa Rica. I am the Program Officer for Energy, Environment and Disaster Risk Reduction at the UNDP office in Trinidad and Tobago. I'd just like to say bravo and kudos to the team in Costa Rica for this initiative. It was an excellent team presentation. Thank you very much. I am particularly interested in the case for decarbonization and mainstreaming that case international recovery strategies. Trinidad and Tobago is a net oil and gas exporter. So that is a particular concern here. I noted quite a few publications have been done and just wanted to find out if they were available for distribution in English. Unfortunately, Spanish is not something that I speak very well. So thank you again. Excellent presentations.
Thank you, Rosemary. Before I give the floor back to Kifa for responding to that, perhaps can I have anybody else wanting to add on this or have a question? I don't see anybody's hand. Okay. Kifa, would you like to just, I don't know if we still have Jose Vicente, but if not, perhaps we can respond to Rosemary.
I mean, sure, we can, regarding sharing documentation, yeah, we don't produce that as much as we would like in English, but certainly we can share. I think it's important just to frame it. Obviously, all what we talked of decarbonization follows government policy. It's obviously, we are raising the concerns related to fiscal, as Jose Vicente explained, fiscal dependence on government revenue, dependence on the consumption or the taxing of hydrocarbons or the use of hydrocarbons. And this, there's already, the President of Costa Rica has already launched a decarbonization of the economy plan for the year 2050. However, we think in the country office that it's obviously, this is something that this administration is very keen to do. As a country, we seem to go in that direction, but there's always risks. There's still politicians now talking that this is, the COVID-19 is exactly why we need to sort of open up to oil and gas and start drilling protected areas and titleizing, making some form, the opposite of what Ana Lucia explained, sort of linked to hydrocarbons. Obviously, each country is a different context, but certainly I think we're all going in the same direction of decarbonization. So the context that Rosemary is explaining is very difficult because of, we seem to not want to antagonize government. But certainly I think as an agency, we should be moving more and more towards the substitution of a government revenue linked to something that's going to kill us, i.e. climate change, carbon consumption, towards substitutes. And we've made here with that project that we're developing, GF7, we're talking about we need to substitute this government fiscal base to, for example, incorporating polluter pay principles. So you'll have another form of revenue, but you also be modifying the behavior of people so there's less externalities of economic activity. And I think the fact, and this was highlighted by our rep, the fact that 20% of or 21% of our government income depends on oil prices in a way, and the fact that we have negative oil prices means that that shock is about to come in a year's time. And if that's the case, even if you are producing oil and gas, it's inevitable that we need to move towards something that's decarbonized. Some countries are more able to do it because of the political environment, like Costa Rica. But I think as an agency, and that's my personal opinion, we should try to move as much in that direction. And this is to everybody, not only Rosemary, but we're happy to share as much as we can in bilateral conversations as well. Sometimes we can just liaise with just specific experts like we've done with other country offices, and we're open for that as bilaterals. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Kiefer, for adding that context.
Thank you, Kiefer. Thank you, Rosemary, for that question. Do we have any more questions from the floor? I don't see anybody else raising hands.
Well, hopefully that was enjoyed.
Okay. In that case, if nobody else wants to make a comment or question, I think we can close the webinar. And we have recorded this webinar. Obviously, we have people across the world in UNDP who are not able to join given time difference, etc. And also we understand that there is quite a few webinars going on these days. So we will be able to have this recorded so you can see it at a later time. And we'll also provide you with the documents, the presentation, and any additional publications or documentation that has been used for putting this together. So again, I want to thank the country office for this initial effort. Hopefully this is the first of several webinars from other country offices in the region or across our UNDP family in different continents. And thank you very much. I hope everybody has a nice day.
Bye-bye. Hasta luego. Have a good day.
Thank you. Bye.